Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, greetings. I open this one up with what is to me familiar gear from way back in the day. For those of you who aren't aware, I've been trained as a pilot, but I received my inspiration from doing the job that required this equipment. The branch in the military that I was in had an altitude chamber, which allowed us to train pilots and flight crew members daily. We would put them in a steel box, which I'll show you a video of here in just a moment. The reason for putting people inside this box was to depressurize, to simulate a flight altitude of an unpressurized aircraft for training purposes. I always joked about it darkly that it was a torture because, whenever I was inside the altitude chamber after work, I'd go home and about an hour and a half later, I was crashed out on the couch. Um, there's definitely advantages to operating inside a pressurized aircraft. So, on the left is what's called an HGU, Hotel Golf Uniform, 55P as in Papa. That is the helmet that I wore. We had to build all of our equipment. All the stuff here on the screen, we had to build with the exception of the Crew 60P in the bottom right corner, that came already pre-assembled. But the rest of it, we had to build it for use in our own life support department that we then issued to ourselves and our colleagues and then our students that came in. And in the center is what I used. It's called a 12P, an MBU, Mike Bravo uniform, 12P. It's a mask breathing unit. It's a combination of a hard shell, soft shell. The black diamond at the top center was where the microphone was mounted on so inside it would be, if you took that off, you'd see the little holes where the screw mounts were with the microphone insertion. And then the cables would run down so it would plug into the ship communication supply. On the right upper corner is the MBU, Mike Bravo uniform 5P. That is the predecessor, and that is a legitimate hard and soft shell combination. It's in two parts. You insert the soft shell inside the hard shell. And the reason you have the soft shell is number one, to create a seal around your face so that you don't get oxygen leakage. Number two is so that you're able to do things such as move your jaw, or more importantly, perform what's called the Valsalva maneuver. That is when you take an index finger from each hand, press it against the side of your nose at the soft point at the end to close it off, and then breathe heavily through your nose in an exercise designed to push air through what's called the eustachian tube to equalize the pressure, between for your eardrums. This is when you're in an aircraft or if you're traveling down a mountain, you will feel the air pressure pushing against your eardrum. You perform this maneuver and it equalizes the air pressure between your inner ear and the outside. Chewing gum helps, but we don't allow gum chewing inside the altitude chamber. Airplanes, mountain climbing, you're more than welcome to chew gum. All right, I promised you a video, so I'm going to walk you through it. The first device we're going to see is the Barony chair. This is a disorientation training exercise. You're blindfolded so you don't get visual cues. Watch the thumbs. The thumbs are indicating the direction he's moving. When it stops gradually or suddenly, the fibers inside your inner ear tell you which direction you're moving, so he shifts his thumbs, removes the mask, recognizes, oh wait, I'm now standing still. This is the altitude chamber. That was the lock-off chamber for doing a rapid decompression, and followed by on the very right was the communications area. They are tasked with recording and taking notes. At the front is the control operator and the lecturer. This is a swing landing trainer where you learn to do your bicycle maneuvers in a parachute to get, if your lines are tangled up or how to do a parachute landing fall. It's, simple exercises. I of the mentality of why do you get out of a perfectly functioning aircraft? Because even a crab landing is better than a jump landing. So back here to this, the reason I wanted to introduce you to the altitude chamber is one thing that I was trying to find a video of, which isn't shown, is the process of the hypoxia exercise. In order to go to altitude, they do several maneuvers. One is they do an ear, nose, throat check to 5,000 feet and back to ground level, followed by a culmination of 30 minutes after all the students have had an oxygen seal test, and they for 30 minutes you purge all the nitrogen from your system. During that time, we provide a training video to distract prior to doing the hypoxia demonstration. I wanted to include exercise, the demonstrations of people losing their wits, the cyanosis that's evident in the fingers and lips. All of this is why I want to build up to it. Is when I say that I do know what I'm talking about, this is the background that I have that demonstrates I know what I'm talking about.
Tonight, a Delta passenger jet attempting to land at New York's LaGuardia Airport, striking its left wing on the runway, and the two pilots on board appeared unaware. Air traffic control pointing out the incident.
Somebody saw some sparks from one of your wings. You guys feel anything?
We didn't, but we'll check it.
The flight, operated by the same regional carrier involved in this dangerous incident last month, a fiery crash landing at Toronto's airport.
I will not fly unless I am the pilot or I know the pilot directly and I know what's involved with it. This is happening far too frequently. Now, I know the reason that it's being reported on more frequently is simply because of who is the president. This stuff was happening prior to, it just wasn't getting reported in the media. You can go to the NTSB and FAA websites about flight mishaps and look it up for yourself. I've gone through a lot of this training. I've flown several hours. I've got double digit hours. I know that's not much, but I've got the military background. I've got the college background. So when I say I'm not going to fly unless I know the flight crew or I'm the pilot themselves, there's a reason for it. I bring this up because why I brought up all of this stuff with the physiology training at the altitude chamber and the importance of that 30 minutes of taking the nitrogen out of your system is that reduces one's susceptibility to altitude sickness, such as the bends. So to pacify the time, we would provide video training seminars, one of which was about a flight to McMurdo, which is on the continent of Antarctica. They had gone beyond their midpoint. And I tried to locate this video, and it's decades old. I tried to use AI. Bottom line is you have your pilot, co-pilot, navigator, flight engineer, and radio controller. So that's 5 people on the aircraft. Somehow during the flight, they discover that the landing gear was not functioning underneath. They had their nose gear, they had their port gear, but their starboard gear was not functioning. During the course of the flight, as they're approaching the South Pole, Antarctica, they make the decision to continue on. They go past the midpoint. They realize, wait a minute, we can't do what we need to do with the landing gear. They knew that they had an issue with it. It wasn't retracting or something to that effect, that the tower called out, and they made a bad decision. And they chose to press forward, and this almost cost everybody their life. But what ended up happening was the captain of the aircraft directed the flight engineer and I believe the co-pilot, or maybe even the radio operator, I could be mistaken, to go to the wing, and the flight engineer crawled into the wing superstructure, dropped the landing gear, physically put a new pin in it so that the landing gear would not collapse as they came in. The aircraft successfully landed at McMurdo, an ice runway, without mishap. But because there were all these other things that were errors along the way, we incorporated it into our training to, you know, hey, you don't want to be this guy. You know, if there's an accident, it's better to turn around and go back in and eat humble pie as somebody fixes it than to be dead. I've got other examples of near death and actual death mishaps, and I do this to illustrate the fact that, not to put down the fact that if you didn't notice it, it was another all-woman flight crew that handled the LaGuardia mishap, as well as the Toronto mishap, as well as the Washington, D.C. mishap. I bring this up as a warning to you. I will not fly commercial so long as this diversity, equity, inclusion nonsense is the norm. I became a pilot because I trained pilots and I recognized that this is going to sound counter to everything that I'm warning you about, but it does make sense if you follow along. When I met with them and trained them, I recognized they weren't any different than I was, except they had been accepted to the academy or they had already completed their college. All right. That part aside, it was the fact that when I talked to them and asked them questions, they themselves encouraged me to pursue my flight training, which I did in aviation science, as well as learning how to fly single engine aircraft, which is far different than multi-engine complex aircraft, um, retractable gear ratings. You know, you get into all the complications, of getting additional ratings, it's additional expense and additional knowledge. The reason I'm bringing all this up is to say I'm very well aware that I do not want to be responsible except for myself or those that I've told immediately, hey, I'm just, a Johnny go lucky pilot. So a lot of these other people, they go for the prestige. I recognize I've done some foolhardy things like scud running and questionable crab landings in the past. These people are flying with an ATP, which is air transportable pilot rating to fly. Because when you get your commercial rating, that just means you can make money at it. It doesn't mean you're flying for the jetliners. I believe Southwest at one point had the lowest required hours of 5,000 hours to even be considered. But these mishaps, just go online, look into them, look into how frequent they happen and who's involved with it. Yes, it is men and women, but when you're pushing people by identity rather than by merit and skill, you're going to have catastrophic results. And that is the reason I'm putting this out here, is to let you know that I recognize my own failings and I would never consider being a pilot for hire at this point. And you should definitely question those with an abysmal track record, and it's all public record. Stay safe.